It's Ash from Super Videos back for another video for The Last of Us on HBO. On this video, we're going to be taking a look at the stages of the infected, and I'm going to be explaining what those stages look like and how it's different from the game and what we could potentially see in the future of the TV adaptation if they follow the video game. So stay tuned, we'll be right back to break this down. Alright, as always, before we dive into it, smash the like button, subscribe to join our community, and press the bell to be notified when I upload on the channel. With that said, let's dive right into it. Now, one thing I want to say right off the bat is this video is targeted towards non-video game players and non-video game fans because if you've played the game, everything I'm going to go through you already know. So you won't really gain anything new. You might enjoy my discussion about how they might change in the TV adaptation, but other than that, I'm gonna go through things that you probably already know about. But if you're not a video game player or fan, then you might enjoy this because I'm gonna be going through what the actual life cycle of a infected on The Last of Us universe looks like. So with that said, let's dive right into it. So this is the stages in the video game. So we start with runners, also referred to as infected. So this is the initial stage when you first get bit. After the first few weeks or months, depending on where you get bit, you turn into a runner or an infected. And then after a while, you turn into what we call a stalker. You can see that the fungi is slowly building in the brain and it's slowly taking over the body. So it's more than just you being infected. You do start to see the growth of the infection and the growth of the fungus inside your brain. And then after a while in the game, you turn into a clicker. So you do clearly see the fungus taking over the entirety of the brain, and the person's brain is really gone at that point, and it's really just the fungus that's inside the head. Now, we've seen a bunch of clickers already on the show, and you could clearly see the difference between regular infected and the clickers. Now, after a while in the game, these clickers turn into what we call the bloater. The bloaters, as the name suggests, are bloated in a way where the fungus is not just growing in the brain, but it's growing in the entirety of the body and it's really taking over the body. And you could see gross fungi within the body. Now, let's go through it in terms of what it looks like in the TV adaptation. Obviously, we do know that the infected look like this. We've seen a bunch already, especially in the opening, in the prologue. We've seen what they look like. Now, the big change from the game, obviously, when it comes to the infected, is that we do have this growing out of the mouth, which we didn't see in the game. But other than that, we could clearly see what the infected look like and what the early stages of the infection looks like. Now, stage 2 is the stalkers. We've seen a few, maybe one or two stalkers already. One of the ones that comes to my mind right away is the stalker that attacked and killed Tess. So that's one of the stalkers that we've seen. So this is what the stalker looks like. We can see that the fungus is growing in the brain, and you could definitely see that it doesn't look like your regular infected anymore. In a way, we could kind of visualize the growth of that fungus in the brain, and we could definitely see how this would transform into the clicker that we see later. Speaking of clickers, that's the third stage, the clickers stage of the infection. Obviously, the name comes from the noise that they make. They click, and that's why they're called the clickers. And as it's been suggested and revealed many times, the clickers are basically like bats because they can't see, they just go with sound. Obviously, they can't see because they don't have eyes. The fungus has grown in the brain and it's grown inside of the face, and it really takes over the sight of the person that's infected, so they can't really see anything. Another thing that separates the clickers from the stalkers, other than the fact that they can't see, is the fact that they are even more aggressive and even more difficult to overcome and to kill. And this is definitely a theme. The more time the infected are out there without being killed, the more aggressive they become and the harder it becomes to get rid of them. And that gets us to the discussion about the bloaters. But before we get to the bloaters, one thing I do want to mention is, contrary to what you might think zombies look like and what we are accustomed to as far as zombie stories, these infected in the universe of The Last of Us are actually alive. It's not like they're dead, they're actually alive. So that means that they do die at some point. Even if people don't kill them, they do end up dying as a life cycle of the infected, just like humans. And we do know when that happens, the infected turn into things that we did see in the premiere episode. They get attached to the walls or the ground, and we do see the infection and the fungus growing all over their bodies and kind of taking over their bodies, but they end up just dying as the life cycle of the infected go. But they're actually dead. But obviously, if we're looking at regular zombies don't die. They could be alive for 100 years. They might not be as deadly as they were initially, but they are still out there. On the contrary, when it comes to the infected, they just die at some point. But those that do survive long enough turn into what we call the bloaters. Like I said earlier, the bloaters are just a more aggressive and a more visually disgusting version of the clickers. They're bigger, they're bloated, and all of that. So that's what bloaters look like. And obviously, the bloaters are super difficult to kill. In the game, specifically, you couldn't kill the bloaters very easily. In fact, it seems like you're not going to be able to kill them in the TV adaptation because we saw that they were unkillable. And that gets us to the next topic. There's actually another phase or stage after the bloaters, which we saw in part 2 in the video game, and that stage was what we call the Rat King monster. Now, the Rat King monster was encountered at Ground Zero in the video game. Ground Zero being where the infection first started. And the Rat King monster was possibly, we don't know for sure, but possibly Patient Zero, which is definitely super interesting, or one of the Patient Zeros, I should say. So those are the ones that have been alive the longest. Just looking at the video game, this is what the Rat King monster looks like. It's freaking disgusting. It's freaking horrific. It's freaky. And obviously in the game, you can't kill this thing easily. It took me like 500 tries to kill this thing. But going back to the TV adaptation, if we think about the bloaters and the fact that they were unkillable, that brings the possibility that they might skip over the Rat King monster entirely. And the reason why they might want to do that is to keep things more set in reality and to really capture the Last of Us story in a more realistic way in the TV adaptation. I would love to see the Rat King monster in the TV show, but I'm afraid that they might not go there. But that's pretty much everything I wanted to go through. That's the stages of the infected in the Last of Us universe. Starting off with the runners or infected, we have the stalkers, and then we have the clickers, and then we have the bloaters, and then obviously we have the Rat King monster, but we might not see the Rat King monster in the TV show. But that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, smash the like button, subscribe to join our community, and press the bell to be notified when I upload on the channel. That's it for this video. See you next time for another super video.